Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're taking a deep dive into some fascinating territory with Bill Gates.
Oh, yeah.
But, and here's the twist, we're not talking about Microsoft or his, billions. We're going way back to his childhood
Interesting.
and some recent reflections he's had about his younger self.
Okay.
And we're going to be pulling from a bunch of recent news articles and even get a sneak peek into Gates's upcoming memoir.
Oh.
It's called Source Code: My Beginnings. So are you ready to kind of unpack this?
Absolutely. Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, because we're going to be exploring this really intriguing question.
Mm.
Would Bill Gates be diagnosed with autism if he were a kid today?
Wow. Now that's a thought-provoking question.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So to kick things off, Gates has been kind of publicly, suggesting that he might be on the autism spectrum based on like how we understand autism today.
Right, right.
And he's mentioned some specific behaviors that, he's reflected on from his childhood. Things like having difficulty socializing, intense focus that sometimes led to him like rocking back and forth, and even sometimes completely missing like social cues.
And, it's interesting to think about those behaviors
Yeah.
because they're often associated with autism,
Right.
but they can also be present in individuals with other neurodevelopmental differences,
Right.
And even the term like neurodivergent itself didn't really come about until the 90s.
Right.
So our understanding of all these nuances,
It's totally changed.
has evolved so much.
Yeah, and so to have someone like Bill Gates, someone with his like stature to talk openly about this,
I think so.
I think that could be incredibly impactful, right?
Sure.
Especially when you think about destigmatizing neurodiversity.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder how his experience might resonate with others.
Mhm.
People who grew up during a time when this awareness was so much lower.
Totally, totally. So many people maybe didn't even have the language to think about this.
Exactly, yeah.
And so you think about Gates' childhood.
Yeah.
He talks about how his parents, understandably, had no real roadmap for how to support him.
Yeah.
He describes them as struggling with their complicated son. They tried therapy, sent him to, in his words, a really great school,
Which was?
Lakeside School,
Lakeside.
in Seattle. And what's really interesting is that
Yeah.
they had a computer terminal at a time when that was incredibly rare.
Right.
So that kind of access, coupled with his, kind of natural inclination,
Totally changed everything.
really set the stage for what was to come.
I mean, just imagine that one opportunity.
It's amazing, right?
Totally pivotal.
And it's not like his parents just focused on his, intellectual pursuits.
Right.
They also had him involved in like baseball, Cub Scouts,
Oh.
all sorts of kind of normal kid activities.
Yeah.
They were trying to find that balance
Yeah.
of nurturing, his individual strengths, but also helping him to kind of navigate social situations.
Yeah. It's a struggle, I imagine.
And what's interesting is that
Yeah.
Gates himself even describes his so-called autistic tendencies
Okay.
as a double-edged sword.
Oh, interesting.
On the one hand, he's like, yeah, there were these social challenges,
Right.
but then on the other, that intense focus that he had, that was a major asset for him, right?
In what way?
When it came to math, science, and then eventually programming.
Right.
So it makes you wonder if those very traits he might have struggled with as a kid could have also played a role in his success.
Absolutely. I mean, neurodivergent individuals, they often excel in certain areas.
Yeah.
And it's because of how their brains are wired, right? So they might process information differently. They might see patterns others miss.
Right.
Or they might be able to hyper-focus on details
Yeah.
in a way that leads to unique insights.
So it's like rather than holding him back, these differences
Became his strengths.
became his strengths. But Gates has also been very open about the fact that he was incredibly lucky.
Yeah, the privilege.
He's talked about winning the birth lottery, born in the U.S., white, male,
Yeah.
and kind of right at the time of the rise of the personal computer.
It's a good point. It's important that he acknowledges those advantages.
Yeah.
Because it challenges this idea that success is just solely based on individual merit.
Absolutely.
Right. He clearly had the talent and drive.
For sure.
But he also had opportunities
A lot of people don't.
that many others simply don't.
And this is a perspective we've heard, like echoed by others too, right? Like Warren Buffett.
Right.
He's also spoken about, the advantages he had as a white male.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, like, how does this recognition of privilege impact how we view success? Not just for figures like Bill Gates, but in society as a whole?
That's a complex question.
It really is.
But it's a conversation worth having, I think.
Oh, for sure.
It's like a step towards...
a more nuanced understanding.
Yeah, more nuanced understanding of success. Acknowledging both the individual effort, but also those systemic advantages that are at play.
Totally, yeah. And it seems like, for Bill Gates, the self-reflection isn't just a passing thought, right? It's like a major theme he's exploring in his new memoir, Source Code, My Beginnings, which is really interesting because you would think, a memoir from Bill Gates would be all about Microsoft and his, rise in the tech world.
Right.
But he seems to be choosing to go way deeper.
It's like he's trying to trace it all back.
Yeah.
To the very roots of his drive, his passions, even his struggles.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating how he's using this personal journey of self-discovery.
Yeah.
To maybe encourage others to do the same.
Right.
To look back at those defining moments in their own lives and consider how those experiences might have shaped their unique way of seeing the world.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah, it makes you think about how those early experiences, especially the ones that might have been challenging, how they play a role in shaping our paths.
Absolutely.
And with Bill Gates, I keep thinking about how those same tendencies that might have caused him difficulties as a kid, like the intense focus, the drive to understand things so deeply, those could have also been instrumental in his success, especially with Microsoft.
Yeah, for sure. It's like we're seeing this more complete picture of him now.
Yeah.
Right? Not just the tech genius or the philanthropist.
Right.
But the individual, right?
Yeah.
Who had to navigate this unique set of challenges and experiences to become who he is today.
Totally.
And it makes you wonder, how did this potential neurodiversity shape his leadership and problem solving?
No, that's such a good question.
Especially in those early days of Microsoft, right?
Yeah, I've always been curious about his leadership style, especially during those really intense years of building Microsoft.
It was a wild time.
There are all these stories about his demanding nature, his relentless pursuit of excellence.
Right.
Do you think those traits are connected to his potential neurodiversity?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, individuals with autism, they often have this really strong sense of systemization and a drive for precision, which could have definitely manifested in his management style.
Totally. And that kind of connects with something else that Gates has been vocal about.
Okay. What's that?
His evolving worldview and his willingness to engage with people who hold really different opinions.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
It's interesting because he's very clear about his own views, but he also seems to recognize the value in understanding perspectives that differ from his own.
I think that takes a certain level of intellectual flexibility.
It totally does.
And a willingness to, step outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's not about agreeing with everyone.
Yeah.
It's about trying to understand their reasoning.
Yeah.
And finding that common ground.
Right.
Where possible.
Which brings us to something I found really interesting.
Okay.
Bill Gates having dinner with Donald Trump.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was, I remember that.
Not exactly a pairing you'd expect, right?
Not really, no. It definitely generated a lot of buzz.
So what's interesting is that it wasn't just some superficial exchange.
Right.
They actually had a pretty in-depth conversation about global health initiatives.
Yeah.
Focusing specifically on polio eradication.
Oh, wow.
So I think it's really noteworthy that Gates, despite their very clear political differences,
absolutely,
he was willing to engage with Trump on such a crucial issue.
It shows you where his priorities lie.
Yeah.
The goal is more important than those personal feelings or affiliations.
Totally.
It's if he sees an opportunity to advance a cause he believes in, he's going to work with whoever he needs to work with.
It's a good reminder that progress sometimes requires us to kind of set aside our biases and focus on shared objectives.
It's not about compromising your values.
Right.
But I think it's about recognizing that collaboration can be a powerful tool for change.
For sure. And it's interesting because this pragmatic approach kind of contrasts with Gates's very vocal criticism of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s views on vaccines.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So on the one hand, he's willing to sit down with someone like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But then he's very firm in his condemnation of Kennedy Jr.'s anti-vaccine stance.
Yeah. I think it just shows the importance he places on, scientific evidence.
Yeah.
And combating misinformation.
Right.
So, like, while he might be open to engaging with diverse viewpoints,
right,
he also draws a line.
when it could have really harmful consequences.
Yeah, when it comes to issues that could potentially have harmful consequences for public health.
It's such a complex situation. It's like he's trying to navigate this like fine line between being open to dialogue,
Yeah.
but also standing up for what he believes is right.
Absolutely.
Even when it means like challenging someone's deeply held beliefs.
Yeah. And, you know, it speaks to the challenges we all face, right?
Yeah.
In a world where information,
Mm-hmm.
both accurate and inaccurate, is just constantly spreading.
Totally.
It's about finding those ways
Yeah.
to engage in, like, productive conversations.
Yes.
While also standing firm on principles grounded in, evidence and reason.
Totally. Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act, and
It is.
and this willingness to engage with these different perspectives, even those that he like strongly disagrees with.
Yeah.
That makes his decision to, really focus on his early life and personal development in source code, My Beginnings,
Yeah.
that much more interesting.
Right.
I think most people would expect
Yeah.
a memoir from Bill Gates to be all about Microsoft and,
The tech.
his whole journey in the tech world.
Right.
But he's choosing to go much deeper than that.
It really does feel like he's trying to understand the origins of his own,
But a code, yeah.
his own source code,
Yeah.
both literally and, like, metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
And by going back and exploring those childhood experiences,
Yeah.
those really formative years,
Yeah.
it seems like he's seeking to uncover how those early influences shaped his thinking.
And ultimately led him to, where he is today.
Exactly.
I think it's a really refreshing approach,
Yeah.
considering like how most public figures, when they write memoirs, they're focused on their achievements.
They're bragging.
Yeah, and all of their successes.
Right.
But he's inviting us to look beyond that, right?
Yes.
And to kind of consider all these complexities that shape an individual's journey.
The whole person.
It makes you think about those moments in your own life, like
Yeah.
those turning points.
Yeah.
That maybe seemed insignificant at the time,
Right.
but actually ended up shaping our paths in really unexpected ways.
That's true.
It's a good reminder that success isn't always linear, right?
It's not.
It can be messy, it can be unpredictable,
Absolutely.
and it's influenced by so many factors that are just beyond our control.
And even with all his extraordinary achievements,
Yeah.
it sounds like Bill Gates' story is no different.
No, and I think that's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
For anyone who's ever felt like they didn't quite fit in,
Yeah.
or anyone who's, had to overcome challenges to achieve their goals.
Right.
It's like he's saying, hey, maybe those quirks, those differences aren't something to be ashamed of.
Exactly.
Maybe they're actually your strengths.
Yeah. That's powerful.
Right.
It's especially in a world that often just emphasizes, like, conformity.
Yes.
And traditional ideas of success.
Totally.
He's challenging those assumptions.
Yeah.
And he's suggesting that, there are so many ways to make a meaningful contribution
To the world.
to the world. Yeah.
And I think it's such a great reminder that innovation often comes from thinking differently, from seeing the world through a different lens,
For sure.
And it makes me wonder, like, in sharing his story so openly,
Yeah.
is he hoping to inspire others to do the same?
To embrace their own, uniqueness.
To embrace their own uniqueness,
Yeah.
to find their own path,
To find their own path to success.
whatever that looks like for them.
Exactly.
I think so too. And it ties back to that whole idea of neurodiversity as a strength,
Yeah.
not a limitation.
Not a limitation.
So by showcasing all these diverse ways in which our brains can work,
It just helps us to kind of,
broaden
to broaden our understanding of intelligence
and create a much more inclusive
and accepting.
and accepting society. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that we've gone way beyond just a typical Bill Gates story.
We have.
We've really delved into his potential neurodiversity, his evolving worldview.
His willingness to challenge conventions.
Yes, in his personal life, but also in his approach to global issues.
It's been fascinating.
Really fascinating. And I think it leaves us with a really thought-provoking question.
What's that?
How might understanding Bill Gates' potential neurodiversity change how we view his accomplishments,
Yeah.
his leadership, and ultimately his contributions to society?
Something to think about.
It really is. And maybe it'll inspire us to look at our own lives, our own strengths and challenges with like a fresh perspective.
Fresh eyes.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
We'll see you next time for another insightful exploration.